The crack of thunder tore through the Montana night as Cole Xanders stumbled toward his barn, rain soaking through his wool coat and plastering his dark hair to his forehead. The spring storm had caught him off guard on his way back from Lovelock's only saloon, turning what should have been a quick ride home into a miserable, mud-soaked journey. April 1876 had brought unseasonably violent weather to this corner of Montana territory, and tonight's downpour was the worst yet. Cole pulled the heavy barn door open just enough to slip inside, grateful for the sudden respite from the pounding rain. The familiar smells of hay, horse, and leather enveloped him as he shook off like a dog, water flying from his drenched clothing. His stallion, Samson, nickered softly from his stall, acknowledging his master's return. "Just a minute, boy," Cole muttered, reaching for the lantern hanging by the door. His fingers fumbled with the matches, still damp from the rain, but eventually he coaxed a flame to life. The warm glow spread through the barn, illuminating the worn wooden beams and neatly stacked hay bales. That's when he heard a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the drumming of rain on the roof. A rustling, followed by a soft gasp. Cole froze, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt revolver at his hip. 6 years since the war had ended, but some habits died hard. "Who's there?" he called, raising the lantern higher. "Show yourself." Silence answered him, but Cole knew what he'd heard. Someone was in his barn. "I'm armed," he warned, drawing his revolver. "Come out now and we can talk civilized like." The rustling came again, followed by a whisper so soft he barely caught it. "Please, don't hurt me." A woman's voice. Cole approached the back of the barn cautiously, lantern held high. The light caught on something moving behind the last stall, a flash of fabric, pale skin. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said, lowering his weapon slightly but keeping it ready. "But you're trespassing on my property." Slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows. A young woman, perhaps 20 or 21, stood trembling before him. Her dress, once fine but now torn and mudded, clung to her thin frame. Dark hair hung in wet tangles around a face that might have been pretty if not for the fear in her eyes, and the ugly purple bruise blooming across her left cheekbone. Cole's breath caught in his throat. The bruise was fresh, angry, deliberate, the kind a man leaves when he means business. It wasn't the only one. As she stepped fully into the lantern light, he could see marks on her arms, her neck. "Please," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "I had nowhere else to go." Cole holstered his gun immediately. "Miss, she swayed suddenly, her eyelids fluttering. Cole lunged forward just in time to catch her as she collapsed, her body feather light in his arms. Up close, he could see how pale she was, lips nearly blue with cold. "Damn it all," he muttered, scooping her up. This wasn't how he'd planned to end his evening, but he couldn't very well leave her here, not in this state, not with those bruises telling a story he couldn't ignore. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Cole carried the unconscious woman across the yard to his cabin. It wasn't much, 2 rooms, sparse furnishings, the bachelor quarters of a man who'd never expected to share his space, but it was dry and warm. The fire he'd banked before heading to town still smoldered in the hearth. He laid her gently on his bed, then stoked the fire until flames leaped up, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls. In the better light, he could finally see her clearly. Her face was a map of abuse, the fresh bruise on her cheek, an older one yellowing around her eye, a cut on her lip that had only recently stopped bleeding. Her hands, though delicate, were raw and scraped. Cole ran a hand through his damp hair. He wasn't a doctor, just a rancher trying to scratch out a living on land that demanded everything from a man. But he knew enough to recognize when someone was hurt and running scared. He gathered clean cloths and his medical supplies, remnants from his time in the war, when he'd learned more about patching up wounds than any man should. Gently, he began to clean the mud from her face, careful around the bruises. The woman didn't stir, her breathing shallow but steady. "Who did this to you?" he murmured, though he knew she couldn't answer. "And what in God's name brought you to my barn of all places?" As if in response, she moaned softly, her head turning on the pillow. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the color of mountain lakes. For a moment, confusion clouded them, then stark terror replaced it. She jerked upright with a cry, pressing herself against the wall. "Easy," Cole said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here. I found you in my barn. You fainted." She stared at him, chest heaving with panicked breaths. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice hoarse but stronger than before. "Cole Xanders. This is my ranch about 5 miles outside of Lovelock." He kept his distance, understanding her fear. "I'm not going to hurt you, miss. You have my word." Her eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the sparse furnishings, the closed door, the windows with rain still streaking the glass. She looked like a cornered animal, calculating escape routes. "What's your name?" Cole asked softly. She hesitated, clutching the blanket to her chest. "Zara," she finally said. "Zara Dawson, Miss Dawson." Cole nodded. "You're hurt and half frozen. Whatever trouble you're in, it can wait until morning. You need rest." "You don't understand," she whispered, real fear making her voice tremble. "He'll come looking. He always does." Cole felt something harden inside him, the same feeling he'd had during the war when facing an enemy that had to be stopped, no matter the cost. "Who will come looking, Miss Dawson?" She looked away, her hand unconsciously rising to touch the bruise on her cheek. "My husband." The word hung in the air between them. Cole's jaw tightened as he processed what she'd told him. A husband. The man who'd marked her body with those bruises was someone who had sworn to love and protect her. "Your husband did this to you." The question was unnecessary, but he needed to hear her say it. Zara nodded, a single tear tracking down her bruised cheek. "Victor has a temper, especially when he drinks." Her voice was flat, as if reciting something she'd explained many times before. "It's usually not this bad, but tonight." She shuddered. "Tonight I thought he might kill me." Cole had seen violence in his life, too much of it. He'd fought in a war that tore the country apart, had watched good men die screaming in blood-soaked fields. But there was something particularly sickening about violence directed at a woman by the very man who should be her protector. "Well, he's not going to find you tonight," Cole said firmly. "And he's not going to hurt you again, not while you're under my roof." Zara looked at him with disbelief, as if kindness from a man was something so foreign she couldn't quite recognize it. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Cole shrugged, uncomfortable with the directness of her question. "My ma raised me better than to turn away someone in need." He stood, moving toward the small kitchen area. "You should eat something. I've got stew I can heat up." "Thank you," she whispered, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "But I don't want to be a burden." "It's no burden," he replied, already stoking the cook stove. "Besides, you look like you haven't had a proper meal in some time." While he worked, Cole couldn't help stealing glances at his unexpected guest. Despite the bruises and fear, there was a quiet dignity about her. She sat with her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her dark hair, now drying into loose waves, framed a face that spoke of both gentleness and determination. He set a bowl of steaming stew before her, along with a chunk of bread and a cup of coffee. "It's not fancy," he apologized. "Bachelor cooking." Zara took the bowl with trembling hands. "It smells wonderful." She took a small bite, then another more eagerly. "How long have you lived here alone?" she asked between careful mouthfuls. "Coming up on 3 years now," Cole replied, settling into a chair across from her. Bought this place after deciding Montana was where I wanted to put down roots. Used my army pay and whatever I'd saved working cattle drives. You were in the war, Cole nodded, unconsciously rubbing the old scar that ran along his forearm. Union cavalry. Saw more than my share before it was over. My father fought, Zara said softly. He never came home. Something passed between them, then a shared understanding of loss. Cole had known men who never returned to their families, had written letters to wives and parents explaining how their loved ones had died bravely, when the truth was often far more brutal and senseless. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Zara continued eating, gaining strength with each bite. When she'd finished, Cole took her bowl and returned with a clean shirt and pair of trousers. "They'll be too big," he said apologetically, "but they're dry. You can change behind that screen there. I'll wait outside." "Mr. Xanders," she called as he reached for the door. "I don't know how to thank you." Cole turned, meeting her gaze directly. "There's no need for thanks, Miss Dawson, and it's just Cole. Mr. Xanders was my father." Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean. Stars glittered overhead in the vast Montana sky. Cole leaned against the porch railing, breathing in the cool night air as he contemplated the situation he'd found himself in. A married woman, running from an abusive husband, had sought shelter in his barn. Now she was in his house, wearing his clothes. If her husband was as dangerous as those bruises suggested, harboring her could bring trouble. The kind of trouble a man living alone on the frontier could ill afford. Yet when he thought of sending her away come morning, something inside him rebelled. Those bruises told a story he couldn't ignore, a story of fear, pain, and desperation that had driven her to hide in a stranger's barn on a stormy night. Cole was still wrestling with these thoughts when the cabin door opened softly behind him. Zara stepped out, swimming in his clothes, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Even in the moonlight, the bruises stood out starkly against her pale skin. "The storm's passed," she observed, hugging herself against the chill. "For now," Cole replied. "There'll be more before spring's done with us." She moved to stand beside him, keeping a careful distance. "I should leave in the morning. I don't want to bring my troubles to your door." "And where will you go?" he asked quietly. Zara stared out at the dark landscape, her profile etched in moonlight. "I don't know. I hadn't thought beyond getting away." "How did you end up in my barn? It's miles from town." "I ran," she said simply. "When Victor passed out, I just ran. I followed the road out of town until I couldn't run anymore. Then I saw your barn." She glanced at him. "I'm sorry for trespassing. I was so cold and it was dry inside." "No need to apologize," Cole assured her. "I'm glad you found shelter." He hesitated, then added, "You're welcome to stay until you figure things out. I've got the space, and there's plenty of work to keep me occupied outside during the day." Zara turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. "You would do that for a stranger?" Cole thought about the right answer. He could say it was Christian charity, or that his mother had taught him to help those in need. Both would be true. But what made the words catch in his throat was simpler and more complicated all at once. Something about this woman's courage in the face of cruelty had awakened a protective instinct he hadn't known he possessed. "Sometimes strangers are just friends we haven't met properly yet," he finally said, offering a small smile. "Besides, I could use the company. Gets mighty quiet out here with just Samson and the cows to talk to." For the first time, Zara's lips curved into a genuine smile. Though small and cautious, it transformed her face, hinting at the woman she might be without fear shadowing her every moment. "Thank you, Cole," she said softly. "I promise I won't stay long, just until I can figure out what to do next." Cole nodded, knowing he should be content with that arrangement but already feeling an inexplicable reluctance at the thought of her leaving. "That's settled, then. You should get some rest. You can have the bed, I'll make do out here." "I couldn't take your bed. You're not taking it." "I'm offering it," Cole interrupted gently. "And I won't hear arguments about it. My ma would haunt me from the grave if I let a lady sleep on the floor." Zara looked like she wanted to protest further but was too exhausted to continue. "Then thank you. Again." She turned toward the door, then paused. "Cole, do you think? Is it possible no one will find me here?" Cole wished he could promise her safety with absolute certainty, but life had taught him not to make promises he couldn't keep. "Lovelock's a small town," he said honestly. "People notice strangers, but my place is isolated enough that you should be safe for a while at least." She nodded, accepting his answer. "Good night, then." "Good night, Zara." As the door closed behind her, Cole remained on the porch, his thoughts a tumultuous mix. He wondered about the husband, what kind of man could strike a woman like Zara, leave those marks on her skin. The thought kindled a slow, burning anger in his gut. Eventually, the chill drove him back inside. Zara was already asleep in his bed, curled tightly beneath the blankets, her face peaceful for the first time since he'd found her. Cole settled on a pallet near the hearth, using his saddle as a pillow as he'd done countless times on cattle drives. Sleep didn't come easily. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Zara's bruised face, heard the tremor in her voice as she spoke of her husband. Cole had faced many dangers in his life, but something told him that the man who had marked Zara Dawson might prove more dangerous than most. Morning arrived with pale golden light streaming through the cabin windows. Cole woke at dawn, as was his habit, and found Zara already up. She had folded the blankets neatly on his bed and was at the stove, her back to him as she tended to something that smelled delicious. "You didn't have to cook," he said, sitting up and running a hand through his sleep-tousled hair. Zara turned, a tentative smile on her face. In daylight, the bruises looked even worse, but there was color in her cheeks that hadn't been there the night before. "I wanted to. It's the least I can do." Cole stood, stretching muscles stiff from a night on the hard floor. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she admitted, "though I look a fright." Her hand ghosted over the bruise on her cheek. "I've seen worse," Cole said, immediately regretting his words when her smile faltered. "I mean, it's all right," Zara interrupted softly. "I know what I look like. Victor made sure I understood exactly how displeasing my appearance was to him." The bitterness in her voice told of years of criticism layered beneath the physical abuse. Cole felt a flare of anger at this unknown man who had systematically broken down a woman's spirit. "Your husband sounds like he could use a lesson in manners," he said, his voice deceptively calm. Zara's eyes flashed with momentary fear. "Please don't say things like that. You don't know what he's capable of." "I can imagine," Cole replied, his eyes lingering on her bruises. She turned back to the stove, ladling what appeared to be oatmeal into 2 bowls. "I found your provisions. I hope you don't mind." "Not at all." Cole accepted the bowl she offered, noting how she avoided his gaze now. "Thank you." They ate in silence for a few moments before Cole spoke again. "I need to tend to the stock and check fences today. Spring always brings damage that needs fixing." Zara nodded, pushing her spoon through her oatmeal. "I could clean up around here, and perhaps mend some things. I noticed you have clothes that need attention." Cole glanced at the pile of shirts with missing buttons and torn seams that he'd been meaning to fix for months. "That's kind of you, but you don't have to earn your keep, Zara." "I want to," she insisted. "I've never. I'm not used to accepting charity." Understanding dawned on Cole. She needed to feel useful to believe she was paying her way. It was a matter of pride. "All right," he conceded. "I'd be grateful for the help." After breakfast, Cole gathered his tools and headed out to begin the day's work. The morning air was crisp but promised warmth later, typical of Montana in late April. As he walked toward the corral where Samson waited, he found himself glancing back at the cabin, where smoke curled from the chimney in the clear blue sky. The day passed quicker than most. Cole repaired fences damaged by winter storms, checked on his small herd of cattle, and split enough firewood to last a week. Throughout it all, his thoughts kept returning to the woman in his cabin. Questions about her past, her marriage, how she had ended up with a man who would treat her so cruelly. When he returned as the sun was setting, the cabin had been transformed. The floors were swept clean, the sparse furnishings arranged more pleasantly, and the rich aroma of cooking filled the air. Zara stood at the stove, her back to him again, humming softly as she stirred something in his old cast-iron pot. "Something smells mighty fine," Cole said, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. Zara turned, a genuine smile lighting her face. The bruises were still there, but somehow less prominent against her now animated expression. "I found vegetables in your root cellar and some dried beef. I hope you don't mind, but I made stew." "Mind? I haven't had home-cooked stew since." Cole trailed off, suddenly remembering the last time at his mother's table before the war, before everything changed. "Well, it's been a long time." Zara seemed to understand the weight of his unfinished thought. She nodded and turned back to her cooking. "It'll be ready soon. There's warm water in the basin if you want to wash up." Cole appreciated the thoughtfulness. He washed his hands and face, suddenly conscious of the day's dirt and sweat in a way he rarely was when alone. When he turned back, Zara was watching him, an unreadable expression on her face. "What is it?" he asked. She shook her head slightly. "Nothing, it's just, you're not what I expected." "Oh," Cole raised an eyebrow. "And what did you expect?" Zara ladled stew into bowls before answering. "When I realized I was in a stranger's barn when I heard your voice. I was terrified you might be like Victor, or worse." She set the bowls on the table and met his gaze directly. "But you're kind, gentle even, it's unfamiliar." The simple statement hit Cole like a physical blow. What kind of life had this woman known if basic kindness was unfamiliar to her? "Not all men are like your husband," Cole said quietly, taking a seat at the table. "I know that," Zara replied, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "My father was a good man. And there were others in town who showed me small kindnesses when they could, though most were too afraid of Victor to do much." "How long were you married?" Cole asked, curious despite himself. Zara stared into her stew as if the answer might be found there. 3 years. I was 18 when we wed. Victor was 35, a successful businessman in Lovelock. My mother died shortly after the war, and with my father gone too, I had few options." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "He seemed so charming then, so protective. I mistook possessiveness for love." Cole nodded, understanding all too well how appearances could deceive. "And the abuse? When did that start?" "On our wedding night," Zara said softly, her voice nearly a whisper. I didn't know what to expect. When I cried out in pain, he thought I was rejecting him. He hit me for the first time then." She looked up, her eyes distant with memory. "He apologized afterward, brought me flowers the next day, said it would never happen again." "But it did," Cole supplied, his appetite suddenly diminished despite the delicious smell of the stew. "It always does," Zara confirmed, "for the smallest things. A meal not cooked to his liking, speaking to another man in town, not smiling enough when he introduced me to his friends." She absently touched the bruise on her cheek. "This was because I asked if we might visit my cousin in Helena this summer." Cole's hand tightened around his spoon. "No man has the right to treat his wife that way. no matter what the law says about a husband's authority. The law, Zara repeated with another bitter laugh. Sheriff Pullman is Victor's hunting companion. The judge plays cards with him every Thursday. There is no law for women like me in Lovelock, Cole, only survival. The hopelessness in her voice stirred something protective in Cole's chest. Then we'll find another way, he said firmly. There are places you could go, bigger cities where he couldn't find you. Zara looked at him, surprise evident in her expression. Cole realized his mistake immediately. I just meant I want to help you if I can. She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decipher some hidden meaning in his words. Finally, she nodded. Thank you, but I've already imposed enough on your kindness. It's not an imposition, Cole insisted, and you're welcome to stay as long as you need to. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as they ate. Cole told Zara about his small ranch, how he'd saved for years to buy the land after the war, working cattle drives and odd jobs until he had enough for a down payment. She listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about his plans for expanding his herd. In turn, Zara shared stories of her childhood in Missouri before the war changed everything. Her father had been a schoolteacher, her mother a midwife. Books and learning had filled her early years, along with dreams of perhaps becoming a teacher herself someday. Victor put an end to those dreams, she said, a shadow crossing her face. He said no wife of his would work, that it would reflect poorly on him, suggest he couldn't provide. Is that what you still want? Cole asked. To teach, Zara's face softened with longing. I love children and books. To share that love with others, yes, I think I would still want that, she sighed. But that life seems very far away now. As the evening progressed, Cole noticed Zara growing more comfortable in his presence. The rigid posture she'd maintained began to relax, and occasionally he even coaxed a genuine laugh from her with stories of his more ridiculous mishaps on the ranch. Later, as Cole prepared to bed down on his pallet by the hearth again, Zara paused by the bedroom door. Cole, he looked up from arranging his blankets. Yes, thank you, she said simply, for everything. Before he could respond, she had disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. Cole lay awake long into the night, listening to the familiar creaks and groans of his cabin settling. His mind kept returning to Zara's story, the abuse, the fear that had driven her to flee into a stormy night with nothing but the clothes on her back. And beneath his concern, something else stirred, something he wasn't quite ready to examine too closely. Days passed, falling into an unexpectedly comfortable routine. Cole worked the ranch from sunup to sundown, while Zara kept the cabin in order and prepared meals that made his usual fare seem bland in comparison. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking of their lives before they met. Cole told her of his experiences in the war, stories he'd never shared with anyone. Zara spoke of her parents, of books she'd loved, of the dreams she'd had before marriage extinguished them. The bruises on her face and arms began to fade, revealing a natural beauty that took Cole's breath away at unexpected moments. Her smile, once rare and tentative, appeared more frequently, lighting her face and transforming her entire countenance. A week after her arrival, Cole returned from checking his herd to find Zara standing in the yard, hanging freshly washed clothes on a line she'd strung between two trees. The spring sunshine caught in her dark hair, which she'd loosely braided over one shoulder. She was humming softly, her movements graceful as she reached up to pin a shirt to the line. Cole reined Samson to a halt, struck by the domesticity of the scene and how right it felt to return home to find her there. Then he caught himself. This wasn't permanent. Zara wasn't his wife, wasn't even staying by choice but out of necessity. And she was still married to another man, no matter how monstrous that man might be. "You've been busy," he called as he dismounted, leading Samson toward the barn. Zara turned, shading her eyes against the sun. The weather was too perfect to waste. Everything smelled musty, so I thought a good washing was in order. She hesitated. "I hope that's all right." "More than all right," Cole assured her, removing Samson's saddle. "The place hasn't been this well kept since, well, ever." Zara returned to her task, but Cole noticed a small smile playing at her lips. It struck him then that she might be healing in ways that went beyond her physical bruises. There was a confidence emerging in her movements, her speech, that hadn't been there when he first found her huddled in his barn. That evening, as they sat before the fire after supper, Cole broached a subject he'd been considering for days. "I need to ride into town tomorrow for supplies," he said, watching Zara's face carefully. "Is there anything you need?" Fear flashed across her features. "You're going to Lovelock?" Cole nodded. "We're running low on flour, coffee, and other necessities. I can't put it off much longer." Zara's hands twisted nervously in her lap. "What if Victor sees you? What if he asks questions?" "I've been to town regularly for 3 years," Cole reassured her. "There's nothing unusual about me buying supplies, and I've no reason to speak with your husband." "You don't understand," Zara insisted, real panic edging into her voice. "Victor owns the mercantile. You can't go there without seeing him." This was news to Cole. He usually dealt with a clerk at the store, a mild-mannered man named Jenkins. "Your husband is Victor Dawson, the owner of Dawson's Mercantile," Zara nodded miserably. "He came west after the war with money from his family in Boston. Bought the store, then expanded to interests in the local mine and the stagecoach line." Her voice grew bitter. "He's one of the most powerful men in Lovelock. That's why no one would help me." Cole digested this information slowly. Victor Dawson's reputation preceded him, a shrewd businessman with political ambitions who donated generously to the town's development. Cole had seen him from afar, but never dealt with him directly, always conducting his business through the employees. "I still need supplies," Cole said finally. "But I can ride to Helena instead. It's further, but—" "No," Zara interrupted, her expression resolute despite the fear in her eyes. "You can't change your routines because of me. That would raise suspicion. You should go to Lovelock as you normally would." She drew a shaky breath. "Just be careful what you say." Cole studied her face in the firelight. "You're worried about what he might do if he discovers where you are." "Not just to me," Zara whispered. "To you as well. Victor doesn't forgive what he sees as interference in his affairs, and I am very much his affair in his mind." The possessiveness implied in her words stirred Cole's anger again. "You're a person, Zara, not property." "The law says otherwise," she reminded him. "As my husband, Victor has rights over me that supersede my own wishes if he found me here." She shuddered. "Just promise you'll be careful in town. Don't mention me. Don't do anything that might make him suspicious." "I promise," Cole assured her, reaching across the space between them to briefly touch her hand. "I'll be back before sundown." The contact, brief as it was, sent an unexpected warmth through him. Zara's skin was soft beneath his calloused fingers, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Zara gently withdrew her hand, a flush spreading across her cheeks. "I should get some rest," she murmured, rising from her chair. "Good night, Cole." "Good night, Zara." As the bedroom door closed behind her, Cole remained by the fire, contemplating the complexity of the situation he found himself in. Harboring a powerful man's wife abused or not could bring consequences he wasn't sure he was prepared to face. Yet the thought of sending Zara away, back to a man who would undoubtedly punish her severely for running, was unthinkable. And beneath these practical concerns lay something more personal. more troubling. The growing awareness that his feelings for Zara were becoming more than mere concern for her welfare. The way his heart quickened when she smiled, how he found himself looking forward to returning home each evening to find her there. Cole ran a hand over his face, sighing deeply. This was dangerous territory for both of them. Zara was vulnerable, dependent on his protection. Any feelings he might develop would be inappropriate to act upon, no matter how genuine they might be. Morning came clear and bright, promising a perfect spring day. Cole prepared for his trip to town with a sense of unease he couldn't shake. Zara was quiet as she prepared breakfast, her earlier fear now hidden behind a mask of calm acceptance. "I've made a list," she said as Cole finished his coffee. "Just everyday items. Nothing that would seem unusual for a bachelor rancher to purchase." Cole accepted the neatly written list, noting the elegant handwriting. "This is helpful, thank you." Zara nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Please be careful." "I will," he promised again, rising from the table. "And I'll be back before you know it." The ride to Lovelock took just over an hour at an easy pace. The town had grown since Cole first arrived in Montana, though it was still small by Eastern standards. A single main street lined with wooden buildings, a church at one end, the sheriff's office and jail at the other. Dawson's Mercantile occupied a prime location in the center, its large windows displaying goods that would tempt even the most frugal shopper. Cole tethered Samson outside the livery stable, where he arranged for the horse to be fed and watered. Then he made his way down the dusty main street, nodding to familiar faces as he passed. No one seemed particularly interested in his presence. He was just another rancher come to town for supplies. The bell above the door jangled as Cole entered the Mercantile. The familiar smell of leather, coffee beans, tobacco, and sundry goods enveloped him. Behind the counter stood Jenkins, the clerk Cole usually dealt with, arranging a display of pocket knives. "Morning, Mr. Xanders," Jenkins called, pushing his spectacles higher on his nose. "Been a while since we've seen you in town." "Spring keeps a man busy," Cole replied easily, moving toward the counter with Zara's list in hand. "That it does," Jenkins agreed. "What can I help you with today?" Cole handed over the list. "Just the usual supplies, nothing fancy." Jenkins scanned the list, nodding. "Should have all this in stock. Let me gather it for you." As the clerk moved around the store, collecting items from shelves and barrels, the bell above the door jangled again. Cole didn't turn immediately, busy examining a display of new fishing tackle. It was only when a commanding voice spoke that he glanced up. "Jenkins, has that shipment of boots arrived yet? Mrs. Henderson is asking again." Victor Dawson stood in the doorway, an imposing figure in an expensive suit that set him apart from the working men of Lovelock. He was taller than Cole had remembered, broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard and cold eyes that surveyed his domain with proprietorial satisfaction. At first glance, he appeared to be a respectable businessman, only the hard set of his mouth hinted at a less benevolent nature. "Not yet, Mr. Dawson," Jenkins replied, his voice taking on a deferential tone. "Should be on tomorrow's stage." Dawson grunted in acknowledgement, then noticed Cole for the first time. "Xanders, isn't it? The rancher from up north?" Cole nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Mr. Dawson." "Haven't seen you in town recently," Dawson observed, moving further into the store. There was nothing overtly hostile in his manner, yet Cole felt himself tensing nonetheless. "Ranch keeping you busy. Always does this time of year," Cole replied, deliberately casual. Dawson nodded, seemingly satisfied with the response. He turned his attention to some paperwork Jenkins had laid out, effectively dismissing Cole. For his part, Cole was grateful for the lack of interest. The less interaction with Zara's husband, the better. Jenkins returned with the last of Cole's supplies, neatly packed in burlap sacks. "That'll be $8.42, Mr. Xanders." Cole counted out the money, aware of Dawson's presence just a few feet away. As he was about to gather his purchases, Dawson spoke again. "Buying quite a lot for one man," he observed, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp. "Taking on extra hands for the season." The question seemed innocent enough, but something in Dawson's manner put Cole on alert. "No," he answered carefully. "Just stocking up. Don't like making the trip to town more than necessary." Dawson nodded slowly, his gaze calculating. "Sensible, though I'm surprised a bachelor like yourself needs so much. Domestic supplies." His eyes flicked to the sewing thread and extra soap on the counter. Cole maintained an impassive expression, though inwardly he cursed himself for not scrutinizing Zara's list more carefully. "Ranch life is hard on clothes," he said with a shrug. "And a man can appreciate being clean, married or not." For a moment, Dawson continued to study him, as if searching for some hidden meaning in Cole's words or manner. Then he seemed to lose interest, turning back to Jenkins with instructions about an order. Cole gathered his supplies, nodded goodbye to Jenkins, and made his way out of the store with relief. That had been too close. Dawson was more observant than he'd anticipated, and clearly suspicious by nature. He would need to be more careful in future. After securing his purchases to Samson's saddle, Cole decided to visit the saloon for a quick drink before heading back. Information traveled fast in a small town like Lovelock, and the saloon was its central hub. If there was talk about Zara's disappearance, he would hear it there. The Silvered Spur was relatively quiet at this hour, with just a handful of patrons nursing drinks at scattered tables. Cole nodded to Tom Bailey, the barkeeper, as he approached. "Whiskey," he requested, placing a coin on the scratched wooden surface. Tom poured the drink and pushed it toward Cole. "Don't often see you in here during daylight hours, Xanders," Cole shrugged. "Been a while since I've been to town at all. Thought I'd treat myself." Tom leaned on the bar, lowering his voice. "Heard you had some excitement in town recently." Dawson's wife gone missing. Cole took a careful sip of his whiskey, ensuring his expression revealed nothing. "Is that so? Disappeared about a week ago from what I hear," Tom continued. "Dawson's been turning the town upside down looking for her, offering a reward and everything." "A reward?" Cole kept his tone merely curious. Tom nodded. $500 for information leading to her return. Claims she's unwell in the mind and needs medical attention. He snorted. "Between you and me, the only thing wrong with that woman's mind was thinking she could escape a man like Victor Dawson." Cole's grip tightened around his glass. "What do you mean?" Tom glanced around before leaning closer. "Everyone knows he beats her." "Oh, she tries to hide the marks, stays home when they're bad, but people talk, especially the women." He shook his head. "Sheriff won't do anything about it, of course. Says what happens between a man and his wife is their business." "That's not right," Cole said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "Didn't say it was right," Tom replied. "Just said that's how it is." He straightened as new customers entered the saloon. "If you ask me, I hope she got good and far away, though I doubt Dawson will stop looking anytime soon. Man's got a reputation for holding grudges." Cole finished his drink, the information settling uneasily in his stomach. If Dawson was offering a reward, it wouldn't be long before every opportunist in the territory was keeping an eye out for Zara. The ranch, isolated as it was, might provide temporary sanctuary, but it couldn't remain a safe haven forever. He thanked Tom and left the saloon, untethering Samson for the ride home. As he mounted, he caught sight of Dawson emerging from the mercantile. deep in conversation with Sheriff Pullman. The two men paused on the boardwalk, and for a brief, heart-stopping moment, Dawson's gaze locked with Cole's across the dusty street. Something cold and calculating flickered in the businessman's eyes before he turned away, continuing his conversation with the sheriff. Cole urged Sampson forward, eager to put distance between himself and Lovelock. The encounter with Dawson, brief as it was, had left him unsettled. There had been something in the man's manner, a predatory awareness that made Cole wonder if his interest in the supplies had been more than casual curiosity. The return journey seemed longer somehow, each mile stretching as Cole's mind worked through the implications of what he'd learned. By the time the ranch came into view, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Zara was waiting on the porch, her figure silhouetted against the evening light. As Cole approached, he could see the tension in her posture, the anxious way she scanned his face for news. "You're back," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Did everything go all right?" Cole dismounted, leading Sampson toward the barn. "Let me see to my horse first, then we'll talk." Inside the barn, as he removed Sampson's saddle and brushed the dust from the stallion's coat, Cole considered how much to share with Zara. The truth would frighten her, but she deserved to know the full extent of the danger. When he returned to the cabin, Zara had already brought in the supplies and was putting them away. She worked methodically, her movements betraying her nervousness. "Did you see him?" she asked finally, her back to Cole as she placed a sack of flour on a shelf. "Yes," Cole admitted. "We spoke briefly at the store." Zara turned slowly, her face pale. "What did he say?" Cole moved to the table, gesturing for her to join him. When they were both seated, he related the encounter as accurately as he could, including Dawson's interest in the supplies. Zara listened without interruption, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "There's more," Cole continued. "Your disappearance is common knowledge in town. Dawson is offering a $500 reward for information leading to your return." Zara closed her eyes briefly, a shudder running through her slender frame. "He won't stop looking," she whispered. "Not until he finds me. He's telling people you're unwell mentally," Cole added gently, "that you need medical attention." A bitter laugh escaped Zara's lips. "Of course he is. If I'm mad, then my accusations against him can be dismissed." She opened her eyes, meeting Cole's gaze directly. "I'm not crazy, Cole. The things he did to me." Her voice broke. No sane woman would stay if she had any choice. "I believe you," Cole assured her, resisting the urge to reach for her hand. "And I won't let him take you back." Zara studied his face, her expression a mix of gratitude and concern. "You don't know what you're saying. Victor is powerful, connected. He could destroy you with a word." "Let him try," Cole said firmly. "I've faced worse odds." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling around them. Finally, Zara spoke again, her voice small but determined. "I need to leave. Not just your ranch, but the territory entirely. Somewhere Victor can't reach." The thought of Zara leaving sent an unexpected pang through Cole's chest. "Where would you go? California, perhaps, or Oregon. Somewhere I could start fresh, where no one knows me." She sighed deeply. "But I have no money, no possessions beyond what I'm wearing. And if Victor has spread the word that I'm mentally unstable." "We'll figure something out," Cole promised. "Together." Zara looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise and something else, a fragile hope that made his heart constrict. "Why are you doing this, Cole? Taking such risks for someone you barely know?" It was a fair question, one Cole had asked himself repeatedly over the past week. The answer that came to him now was simple yet profound. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said quietly. "And because in just a week, you've become important to me." The admission cost him something, exposing a vulnerability he usually kept well guarded. Zara's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Cole assured her. "Just know that you're not alone in this anymore." The days that followed took on a heightened sense of urgency. Cole and Zara discussed various plans for her escape from Dawson's reach, weighing options and risks. The most promising seemed to be securing passage on a westbound train from Helena. But even that presented challenges. Dawson might have contacts watching the stations, and Zara had no documentation or money of her own. Despite the cloud of uncertainty hanging over them, life at the ranch continued. Cole worked his land, cared for his animals, and made preparations for the coming summer. Zara kept the cabin, cooked meals that made Cole wonder how he'd ever survived on his own cooking, and slowly began to venture outside more, helping with the kitchen garden and even learning to care for the chickens. In the evenings, their conversations grew deeper, more personal. Cole spoke of his family in Pennsylvania, of his mother's death just before the war and his father's a year after he returned, of his decision to head west rather than rebuild the family farm, seeking something that was entirely his own. Zara shared memories of her own family, her father's love of literature, her mother's skill with herbs and healing. She spoke of the dreams she'd had as a young woman, before circumstances and Dawson's manipulations had narrowed her world to the confines of a gilded cage. "I thought he was my salvation," she admitted one night as they sat on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "After my mother died, I had nowhere to go. When Victor began courting me, everyone said I was fortunate to catch the eye of such a prosperous man." Her voice grew distant with memory. "He was charming then, attentive, brought me books, remembered things I mentioned liking. I mistook his possessiveness for devotion." "That's not your fault," Cole said quietly. "Men like Dawson are expert manipulators." Zara nodded, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the evening chill. "By the time I realized what he truly was, it was too late. We were married, and I was entirely dependent on him. He made sure of that, isolated me from the few friends I had, controlled every aspect of my life." She sighed. The worst part was how he would be perfectly kind in public, then turn into someone else entirely behind closed doors. Cole's jaw tightened at the thought of what Zara had endured. "No one helped you, noticed what was happening," some suspected, Zara admitted. "But Victor is influential in Lovelock. People who rely on his business or goodwill look the other way. Those who might have helped were afraid of his retribution." She turned to Cole, her face silvered by moonlight. "Until you." The simple statement hung between them, laden with meaning Cole wasn't sure how to interpret. He cleared his throat. "I just did what anyone with decency would do." Zara's smile was sad. "You'd be surprised how rare decency can be, Cole." 2 weeks after Zara's arrival, as spring fully established itself across the Montana landscape, the peaceful routine they had established was shattered. Cole had risen before dawn, as was his habit, to tend to the morning chores. Zara still slept, exhausted from helping him mend fences the previous day. The first hint of trouble came as Cole was feeding the chickens. Samson, tethered near the barn, suddenly raised his head, ears pricked forward toward the road. A moment later, Cole heard it too, the distant sound of approaching horses, multiple riders by the sound of it. Few people visited his isolated ranch, and never so early in the morning. Cole moved quickly to the barn, grabbing his rifle from where it hung just inside the door. As he stepped back into the yard, he could make out 4 riders cresting the rise that led to his property. His heart sank as he recognized the lead figure, Victor Dawson. mounted on a sleek black stallion that probably cost more than Cole's entire herd. Beside him rode Sheriff Pullman, his badge catching the early morning light. The other two men Cole didn't recognize, but their hard faces and the rifles slung across their saddles told him all he needed to know. Cole glanced toward the cabin, where Zara still slept unaware. There was no time to warn her, no chance to spirit her away before the riders arrived. All he could do was stand his ground and hope to somehow defuse the situation. "Xanders," Dawson called as the riders drew closer. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Cole stood firm in the yard, his rifle held casually but ready. "This is private property, Dawson. What brings you out so early?" The four riders pulled to a stop a few yards away. Sheriff Pullman looked uncomfortable, avoiding Cole's gaze, but Dawson stared down from his mount with cold fury barely contained behind a mask of civility. "Let's not play games," Dawson said, his voice deceptively pleasant. "My wife has been missing for over 2 weeks." Imagine my surprise when a helpful citizen mentioned seeing a woman matching her description at a certain isolated ranch. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've come to take her home, where she belongs." Cole kept his expression neutral, though his mind raced. Someone in town must have seen Zara, perhaps on the one occasion she'd ventured outside while he worked nearby. Or maybe Dawson had simply been suspicious of Cole's purchases and decided to investigate. "I don't know what you're talking about," Cole replied evenly. "I live alone." Dawson's smile tightened. "Sheriff, I believe Mr. Xanders here is lying to an officer of the law. That is an offense, is it not?" Sheriff Pullman shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "Now, Victor, let's not jump to conclusions." "Maybe search the cabin," Dawson interrupted, his gaze never leaving Cole's face. "My wife is mentally unwell, Sheriff. She needs medical attention. Every moment we delay puts her at risk." Before Cole could protest, the cabin door opened. Zara stood on the threshold, her face pale but resolute. She had dressed quickly, her hair hastily braided over one shoulder. Even from a distance, Cole could see how she trembled. "I'm not unwell, Victor," she called, her voice remarkably steady despite her evident fear. "And I'm not going back with you." Dawson's expression darkened at the sight of his wife. "Zara, you're not thinking clearly. Come here now." Cole moved slightly, positioning himself between the riders and the cabin. "The lady says she's staying." "The lady," Dawson spat, "is my wife, my property under the law." He turned to the sheriff. "Pullman, I want this man arrested for abducting my wife." Sheriff Pullman finally met Cole's gaze, his expression apologetic but firm. "Mr. Xanders, you're in a difficult position here. Mrs. Dawson is legally under her husband's authority. If you're preventing her from returning to him—" "He's not preventing anything," Zara interrupted, moving to stand beside Cole. Though she still trembled, there was a newfound strength in her posture. "I came here of my own free will, seeking shelter from a man who has beaten me repeatedly." She pointed to her face, where the last yellowing traces of bruises were still visible. "These marks are his handiwork. One of many lessons he's taught me over the years." Dawson's face contorted with rage. "Lies. She's hysterical, unstable, has been since losing our child last winter." He turned to the sheriff again. "You see how she fabricates these wild accusations?" The revelation hit Cole like a physical blow. Zara had never mentioned a child. He glanced at her, seeing the pain that flashed across her face at Dawson's words. "I lost our baby because you pushed me down the stairs," Zara said, her voice breaking. "Because I dared to visit a friend without your permission." A heavy silence fell over the yard. Even the two unnamed men exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sheriff Pullman's face had paled beneath his weathered tan. That's enough, Dawson snapped. Zara, come here now, or so help me, you'll what? Cole interrupted, raising his rifle slightly. Beat her again. Not while I'm standing. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, 5 men and 1 woman frozen in a tableau of conflict. Then Sheriff Pullman broke the silence. Victor, maybe we should discuss this calmly, he suggested, his earlier certainty wavering. If Mrs. Dawson has concerns about her safety is my concern, not yours, Dawson cut in. And certainly not this rancher's. He fixed Cole with a venomous stare. I don't know what lies she's told you, what feminine wiles she's used to secure your protection, but make no mistake, she will return with me today. No, Cole said simply. She won't. Dawson's hand moved toward his coat and Cole tensed, anticipating a weapon. But instead, Dawson withdrew a folded document. Sheriff, perhaps you should inform Mr. Xanders of the law regarding this matter. Pullman accepted the paper reluctantly, glancing at it before addressing Cole. This is a legal writ, signed by Judge Wilson, authorizing the return of Mrs. Zara Dawson to her husband's custody. He sighed heavily. I'm afraid the law is clear in this case, Mr. Xanders. A husband has the right to determine his wife's place of residence. Cole had expected this, the law's blind spot when it came to protecting women from abusive husbands, but the reality of it still burned like acid. And if the wife fears for her life, does the law have anything to say about that? Preposterous, Dawson scoffed. Zara has never wanted for anything under my care. This delusion of abuse is part of her illness. Zara stepped forward, her eyes flashing with long-suppressed anger. Show them, Victor. Show them your hands. When Dawson remained silent, she continued, her voice gaining strength. My husband wears rings, expensive, heavy ones. They leave distinctive marks when he strikes me. Marks that Dr. Farley has treated multiple times, though he was too cowardly to report them. Sheriff Pullman's gaze dropped to Dawson's hands, where indeed several rings glinted in the morning light. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. Sensing weakness, Dawson changed tactics. This is absurd. Zara, I forgive your confusion, your indiscretion with this man. He gestured dismissively at Cole. All will be forgotten if you come home now. Indiscretion. Cole repeated, anger rising in his chest. Is that what you think this is? What else would drive a woman to abandon her comfortable home for a crude ranch? Dawson sneered. Clearly you've taken advantage of her fragile state. Before Cole could respond, Zara's hand found his arm, her touch steadying. My husband cannot imagine a man helping a woman without expecting something in return, she said clearly. Because that is not the kind of man he is. She addressed the sheriff directly. I am not confused, Sheriff Pullman. I am not ill. I am a woman who has suffered years of abuse at the hands of a man who sees me as property, not a person. Sheriff Pullman shifted uncomfortably, caught between his duty to uphold the law and the growing evidence that all was not as Dawson claimed. Mrs. Dawson, these are serious allegations. If there's truth to them, there is not, Dawson interrupted coldly. And I've had enough of this charade. He nodded to the 2 unnamed men. Get my wife. The men dismounted, hands moving to their weapons. Cole raised his rifle, aiming squarely at the closer of the 2. Take one more step and it'll be your last, he warned, his voice deadly calm. The men hesitated, looking to Dawson for direction. Tension crackled in the air like lightning before a storm. It was Zara who broke the impasse. Sheriff Pullman, she said, her voice clear and controlled despite her fear. I wish to file formal charges against Victor Dawson for assault and battery. Multiple counts. The sheriff blinked in surprise. Madam, that's my legal right, Zara finished for him. Even as a married woman, I can seek protection from the law when my life is endangered. I've studied the statutes carefully, Sheriff. Have you? Cole glanced at her with new admiration. Somewhere beneath the fear and abuse, a formidable woman had been waiting to emerge. Dawson's face had darkened to an alarming shade. This is outrageous. Pullman, do your duty and arrest this man for interfering with a husband's rightful authority. The sheriff looked torn, his gaze moving from Dawson to Zara to Cole and back again. Finally, he sighed deeply. Victor, I think it would be best if we all return to town and sort this out properly. If Mrs. Dawson wishes to file charges, she has that right. Nonsense, Dawson exploded. I won't be made a spectacle of because my wife has taken leave of her senses. He turned his furious gaze on Zara. You think this changes anything? You think hiding behind this nobody will save you from the consequences of your actions. The only action I regret, Zara replied steadily, was believing you could ever change. Something snapped in Dawson then. With a cry of rage, he lunged from his horse toward Zara, his hand raised to strike. Cole moved instinctively, pushing Zara behind him and bringing the butt of his rifle up in a swift, brutal arc. The crack of wood against bone echoed across the yard as the rifle stock connected with Dawson's jaw. The businessman crumpled to the ground, blood streaming from his mouth. His two hired men reached for their weapons but froze as Sheriff Pullman drew his own. That's enough, the sheriff barked, his gun trained on the hired men. The next man who draws gets a bullet. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the hired men raised their hands in surrender. Dawson groaned, pushing himself to a sitting position. Blood stained his expensive suit, and when he opened his mouth to speak, Cole could see at least one tooth was missing. You'll regret this, he slurred, his voice thick with pain and fury. Both of you. I'll see to it personally. Sheriff Pullman dismounted, keeping his gun ready as he approached Dawson. Victor, you just tried to assault your wife in front of witnesses, including an officer of the law. That changes things considerably. She's my wife, Dawson spat, as if that explained and excused everything. And that doesn't give you the right to beat her, Pullman replied with more backbone than Cole had expected. He turned to Zara. Mrs. Dawson, I think it would be best if you come back to town with us. You can file your charges formally, and we'll ensure your safety while this is sorted out. Zara hesitated, glancing at Cole. He nodded slightly, understanding that this was their best chance to establish her claims legally. I'll come with you, she agreed, then added firmly, but I will not stay in the same building as my husband. Sheriff Pullman nodded. That's reasonable. We can arrange lodging with Mrs. Finch. She's taken in women in difficult situations before. Dawson struggled to his feet, his usual composure shattered by rage and humiliation. This isn't over, he hissed, glaring at Cole with naked hatred. Not by a long shot. For now it is, Sheriff Pullman said firmly. Mr. Xanders, I'd appreciate it if you'd accompany us back to town as well. There are statements to be taken. Cole nodded, though unease crawled along his spine at the thought of leaving his ranch unprotected with Dawson's threats hanging in the air. I'll need a few minutes to secure things here. As Cole quickly arranged for the animal's care during his absence, he was acutely aware of Zara preparing to leave as well. She had changed into a cleaner dress, one of her own that Cole had washed and mended for her, and had packed the few belongings she'd accumulated during her stay. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly when they had a moment alone in the cabin. Zara nodded, though fear still shadowed her eyes. "It's the only way. If I run now, he'll never stop hunting me. My only chance is to face him openly, to make his abuse a matter of public record." She looked up at Cole, her expression vulnerable yet determined. "Will you stand with me?" Cole reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Every step of the way, the ride to Lovelock was tense and silent. Sheriff Pullman led the procession, followed by Dawson flanked by his hired men. Cole and Zara brought up the rear, maintaining a careful distance. Though no words passed between them, Cole could sense Zara drawing strength from his presence, straightening her posture and lifting her chin as they approached the town. Word traveled fast in Lovelock. By the time their unlikely party reached the main street, curious onlookers had gathered on porches and boardwalks. The sight of Victor Dawson, the town's most prominent citizen, with blood staining his shirt and a rapidly swelling jaw, elicited gasps and murmured speculation. Sheriff Pullman directed them all to his office, where he methodically took statements from each person involved. Dawson's version portrayed Zara as mentally unstable and Cole as an opportunist who had taken advantage of a vulnerable woman. Zara, with quiet dignity, recounted years of escalating abuse, including the incident that had caused her miscarriage. Cole corroborated finding Zara in his barn, describing her injuries and fear. Throughout the process, Dawson's cold fury never abated. His eyes, when they rested on Zara, promised retribution. When they turned to Cole, they promised destruction. By late afternoon, Sheriff Pullman had completed his documentation. "I'll present these statements to Judge Wilson tomorrow," he informed them. "In the meantime, Mrs. Dawson will stay with Mrs. Finch as arranged." He turned to Dawson. "Mr. Dawson, I must ask you to refrain from any contact with your wife until the judge has reviewed this matter." "This is absurd," Dawson sneered, dabbing at his still bleeding mouth with a handkerchief. "You're taking the word of a hysterical woman and a ranch hand over a respected businessman." "I'm following procedure," Pullman corrected, his patience clearly wearing thin. "And I'll remind you that I witnessed your attempt to strike Mrs. Dawson myself." Dawson rose abruptly. "We'll see what Judge Wilson has to say about this farce." He glared at Cole. "And you, don't think this is over. Men like you don't win against men like me." With that ominous parting shot, Dawson stormed out, his hired men following close behind. Sheriff Pullman sighed heavily once the door closed. "I apologize for not taking your concerns more seriously before, Mrs. Dawson. It's uncomfortable to think a man of Mr. Dawson's standing could be capable of such behavior." Zara nodded, accepting the belated acknowledgement without comment. "What happens now?" "I'll escort you to Mrs. Finch's boarding house," Pullman replied. "As for Mr. Xanders," he turned to Cole, "you're free to return to your ranch, though I'd advise caution. Dawson isn't a man who forgets a slight." Cole glanced at Zara, reluctant to leave her alone in town. "I'd like to make sure Mrs. Dawson is settled safely first." The walk to Mrs. Finch's boarding house took them down Lovelock's Main Street, past the curious stares of townsfolk unaccustomed to such drama. Cole maintained a protective stance beside Zara, his hand never far from his holstered revolver. Mrs. Finch, a stout widow with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, received them at her door. "I've prepared the blue room," she informed Zara, after Sheriff Pullman had explained the situation. "It has a good lock on the door, which I suspect you'll appreciate." Zara thanked her with genuine gratitude, then turned to Cole as Mrs. Finch tactfully retreated inside to prepare tea. "You should go," she said softly. "Your ranch can wait," Cole interrupted gently. "I want to make sure you're truly safe here." Sheriff Pullman cleared his throat. "Mrs. Finch is known for her discretion and protective nature, Mr. Xanders. Mrs. Dawson will be as safe here as anywhere in town." He paused, then added more quietly, "Though I'll have a deputy keep an eye on the place tonight, just to be certain." Cole appreciated the sheriff's precaution but still hesitated. The thought of leaving Zara alone, even under Mrs. Finch's care, sat uneasily with him. Zara seemed to read his thoughts. "Cole, I'll be all right," she assured him. "And you need to protect your property, if Victor can't strike at me directly." She left the implication hanging. The realization hit Cole with sudden clarity. His ranch, his livelihood, would be an obvious target for Dawson's revenge. "You're right," he acknowledged reluctantly. "But I'll be back tomorrow for the judge's hearing." "I'm counting on it," Zara replied, a tremulous smile touching her lips. Their goodbye was necessarily brief and formal, given the sheriff's presence and the watchful eyes of Lovelock citizens. But when Zara squeezed his hand in parting, Cole felt the depth of her gratitude and trust in that simple gesture. The ride back to his ranch was solitary and tense. Cole pushed Sampson harder than usual, driven by a growing unease about what he might find upon his return. Dawson had means and motivation for retribution. Cole had only his rifle and his wits. As the ranch came into view, Cole slowed Sampson to a walk, scanning for any sign of disturbance. Everything appeared normal, the cabin intact, the barn door closed as he'd left it, chickens scratching in the yard. But something felt wrong, a prickling sensation at the back of his neck that he'd learned to trust during the war. He approached cautiously, rifle ready, and tethered Sampson at a distance from the buildings. Silence hung over the property, broken only by the soft lowing of cattle in the distant pasture. The cabin was undisturbed, everything as they had left it that morning, Zara's coffee cup still on the table, the blankets folded neatly on the bed. Cole checked every corner, finding nothing amiss. The barn was next. As Cole slid the heavy door open, the familiar smells of hay and horse greeted him. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance. Then he noticed a small trail of liquid on the packed dirt floor, leading toward the back where he stored supplies. Following the trail cautiously, Cole found its source. A deliberate spill of coal oil, spreading slowly toward a stack of hay bales. Beside it lay a smoldering rope fuse, carefully arranged to ignite the oil once it burned down. Cole stomped out the fuse just as it reached the spreading pool, narrowly preventing a blaze that would have consumed the barn and likely spread to the cabin. "Bastard," Cole muttered, knowing exactly who was responsible. Dawson hadn't wasted any time in making good on his threats. Checking the rest of the property revealed no further sabotage, but Cole remained on high alert. He spent a restless night, keeping watch from the porch, rifle across his knees. His thoughts continually returned to Zara, alone in town, surrounded by people who had looked the other way for years while she suffered. Mourning brought no relief from his concerns. Cole tended to his chores quickly, then saddled Sampson for the ride back to Lovelock. The attempted arson confirmed what he had already suspected. Dawson would stop at nothing to punish those who had crossed him. The town was unusually animated when Cole arrived. Clusters of people gathered on street corners, their conversations hushed but animated. Cole caught fragments as he passed Dawson, Judge Wilson, scandal enough to know that Zara's allegations had become public knowledge. He tethered Sampson outside the sheriff's office and found Pullman at his desk, looking harried and sleepless. "Ah, Xanders," the sheriff greeted him. "I was about to send someone to fetch you." "What's happened?" Cole asked, dread pooling in his stomach. Pullman rubbed his temples wearily. "Dawson left town last night, cleaned out his accounts at the bank, according to Merriweather, who's none too pleased about it. Took the midnight stage to Helena." Cole frowned, processing this unexpected development. "And Zara, Mrs. Dawson, safe at Mrs. Finch's," Pullman assured him. "Though Judge Wilson is waiting to speak with all parties, this complicates matters." Dawson's flight puzzled Cole. It wasn't the action of a man confident in his legal standing. Why would he run? Surely he believed the judge would side with him. Sheriff Pullman looked uncomfortable. "That's the thing. After you left yesterday, some of the women in town started coming forward. Seems Mrs. Dawson wasn't the only one who'd noticed Dawson's tendencies. Mrs. Peterson from the dressmakers had been treating Mrs. Dawson's injuries for years. Dr. Farley finally admitted he'd documented her injuries, though he never reported them. He sighed heavily. Seems like once one person spoke up, others found their courage too. A wave of relief washed over Cole. So people believe her. Enough do, Pullman confirmed. And Dawson must have realized the tide was turning. A man like him, reputation is everything. He stood, reaching for his hat. Judge Wilson is waiting at the courthouse. Best not keep him longer. The small courthouse was crowded when they arrived. It seemed half the town had turned out to witness the proceedings. Zara sat at the front, her posture rigid with tension. When she saw Cole, her face brightened momentarily before returning to its carefully composed expression. Judge Wilson, a stern-faced man with spectacles perched on his nose, called the informal hearing to order. In Dawson's absence, the proceedings were brief. The judge reviewed the statements, listened to additional testimony from Mrs. Peterson and Dr. Farley, and considered Sheriff Pullman's account of the confrontation at Cole's ranch. In the absence of the accused, Judge Wilson pronounced finally, I cannot render a formal judgment on Mrs. Dawson's charges, however. He peered at Zara over his spectacles. I find sufficient evidence to justify a writ of protection should Mr. Dawson return to Lovelock. Furthermore, given the circumstances of his departure, I am inclined to consider Mrs. Dawson abandoned by her husband, which provides grounds for eventual divorce proceedings, should she wish to pursue them. A murmur rippled through the gathered townspeople. Divorce was rare and scandalous, yet in this case, public opinion seemed to favor Zara's right to seek one. Thank you, Your Honor, Zara said quietly, her voice steady despite the emotion Cole could see in her eyes. As the gathering dispersed, Cole made his way to Zara's side. Are you all right? He asked softly. She nodded, her smile tired but genuine. Better than I've been in years. She glanced around at the dispersing crowd. I never thought they would believe me over him. Never thought I'd have the courage to speak out at all. Cole smiled, pride warming his chest. You're stronger than you knew. Mrs. Finch approached them, her kind face creased with concern. You're welcome to continue staying with me, dear, she told Zara, for as long as you need. Thank you, Zara replied sincerely. But she glanced at Cole, a question in her eyes. Cole understood immediately. Mrs. Dawson is welcome to return to my ranch if that's her wish. As a guest with all propriety, he added hastily, aware of the potential for gossip. Mrs. Finch considered this, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps that would be best. There are still those in town loyal to Dawson, and while he's gone for now. She didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone knew that men like Victor Dawson rarely accepted defeat graciously. Sheriff Pullman, who had overheard the exchange, nodded his agreement. I'd feel better knowing Mrs. Dawson was away from town for a while, at least until we're certain Dawson's truly gone. He turned to Cole. Though you should know, Xanders, that your ranch might still be a target for his vengeance. Cole briefly related the attempted arson he'd discovered. I'm aware of the risk, he concluded, but my place is isolated enough to give us warning of any approach, and I'm capable of defending it. The matter settled, Cole escorted Zara back to Mrs. Finch's to gather her few belongings. As they walked, Zara seemed lighter somehow, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. What will you do now? Cole asked as they approached the boarding house. Zara considered the question thoughtfully. Begin again, I suppose. If the judge is right about abandonment providing grounds for divorce, I'll pursue that. A shadow crossed her face. Though I have no illusions that Victor will make it easy. And after, Cole pressed gently, Where will you go?" Zara glanced at him, something vulnerable in her expression. "I haven't thought that far ahead yet. For 3 years I couldn't imagine a future beyond the next day." She hesitated. "But I know I don't want to stay in Lovelock, where everyone knows me as Victor's poor, abused wife." Cole nodded, understanding her desire for a fresh start, yet the thought of her leaving, of never seeing her again, created an ache in his chest he couldn't quite name. "Whatever you decide," he said carefully, "know that you have a friend in me." Zara's smile brightened. "The best friend I could have asked for." The ride back to the ranch was companionable, with Zara seated behind Cole on Samson. Unlike their first journey together, when she had been unconscious in his arms, this time she was awake, her arms wrapped securely around his waist. Cole was acutely aware of her presence, the trust implicit in her touch. Upon arriving, they found the ranch undisturbed. Cole helped Zara down from Samson, then led the horse to the barn while she went ahead to the cabin. When he returned, he found her standing in the middle of the main room, looking around with an expression of quiet contentment. "It feels like coming home," she admitted softly. "Is that strange? I've only been here a few weeks." Cole shook his head. "Not strange at all. Sometimes a place just fits, like it's been waiting for you." Their eyes met across the room, and something shifted in the air between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that stormy night when he first found her in his barn. But Cole was careful not to press, aware of how vulnerable Zara still was, how recently she had escaped an abusive marriage. The days that followed settled into a new routine, more relaxed than before, with the immediate threat of Dawson's discovery removed. Zara continued to help around the ranch, but now she ventured further afield, accompanying Cole as he checked fence lines or tended to his small herd of cattle. She took particular pleasure in the kitchen garden, expanding it with seeds Mrs. Finch had given her as a parting gift. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch watching the sunset, or by the fire reading from Cole's small collection of books. Conversations flowed easily between them, covering everything from childhood memories to dreams for the future. "I'd like to teach again someday," Zara confided one evening as they sat beneath a sky blazing with stars. "I had almost forgotten that dream, but it's coming back to me now." Cole smiled, watching the way the moonlight silvered her hair. "You'd make a fine teacher, the kind that changes lives." Zara turned to him, her expression serious. "You've already changed mine, Cole. I don't think I've properly thanked you for that." "No thanks needed," he replied, suddenly awkward beneath her earnest gaze. "Yes, there is," she insisted gently. "When you found me that night, I had nothing left but fear and desperation. You gave me safety, respect, a chance to remember who I was before Victor broke me down." Her voice caught slightly. "You really saw me when I'd become invisible to everyone else." Cole wanted to reach for her hand, to pull her close and promise that he would always see her, but he held back, respecting the boundaries that her experience had made necessary. "Anyone would have done the same," he said instead. "No," Zara replied with quiet certainty. "They wouldn't have. And we both know it." She smiled then, changing the subject. "Tell me more about your plans for the ranch. You mentioned wanting to expand your herd." Cole let her steer the conversation to safer topics, though the intensity of the moment lingered between them, unspoken but acknowledged. A week passed, then two, with no word of Victor Dawson. Sheriff Pullman rode out to the ranch occasionally, bringing news from town and checking on their welfare. According to his sources, Dawson had been seen boarding a train bound for San Francisco. Whether he intended to start anew there or was merely passing through remained unknown. With each passing day, Zara's confidence grew. The bruises faded entirely, and with them, some of the shadows in her eyes. She laughed more freely, spoke her mind without hesitation, moved through the world as if reclaiming her right to occupy space within it. Cole found himself falling deeper under her spell, admiring not just her beauty, which blossomed as fear receded, but her resilience, her intelligence, her gentle humor that emerged like spring flowers after a hard winter. One afternoon in late May, as they worked together in the garden, Sheriff Pullman arrived with news. Judge Wilson had officially declared Victor Dawson in abandonment of his marital duties. The legal proceedings for divorce could begin once the required waiting period had passed. Zara received the news with quiet gratitude. When the sheriff had departed, she sat on the porch steps, her expression pensive. "I never thought I'd be free of him," she said as Cole joined her. "Part of me still expects to wake up and find this has all been a dream, that I'm back in that house in Lovelock, trying to predict his moods, walking on eggshells to avoid his temper." "It's not a dream," Cole assured her. "You're free, Zara, free to build whatever life you want now." She turned to him, her gaze searching his face. "And what about you, Cole? What do you want?" The question caught him off guard with its directness. Cole hesitated, weighing his words carefully. What would make you happy?" Zara shook her head slightly. "That's not an answer. I'm asking what you want for yourself." Cole looked out across his land, the pastures where his cattle grazed, the garden they had expanded together, the cabin that had never felt like a true home until Zara filled it with her presence. "For a long time, all I wanted was this place," he said slowly. "Something that was mine, that I'd built with my own hands, something permanent after years of wandering." He turned to meet her gaze. "But lately, I've been thinking that land and cattle aren't enough to make a home. Not really." Zara's breath caught audibly. "What else would you need?" The moment stretched between them, fraught with possibility. Cole knew he stood at a crossroads. He could retreat to safer ground, or he could risk everything by speaking the truth that had been growing in his heart. "You," he said simply. "If that's something you might want too." Zara's eyes widened, a flush spreading across her cheeks. "Cole, she stopped, seeming to struggle with her response. "My experience with marriage has been horrific. I don't know if I can." "I'm not asking for marriage," Cole interrupted gently. "Not now. Maybe not ever, if that's not what you want. I'm just telling you that these weeks with you have been the happiest of my life, and the thought of you leaving." He shook his head. "Well, it's your choice. It has to be your choice. I just wanted you to know where I stand." Zara was quiet for a long moment, her gaze dropping to her hands clasped in her lap. When she looked up again, her eyes shone with unshed tears, but she was smiling, a real smile that reached those eyes and made them gleam like sunlight on water. "I don't want to leave," she admitted softly. "When I think about the future now, I see this place. I see you." She reached for his hand, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. "I don't know what that means yet or how we move forward from here, but I know I've never felt as safe, as respected, as cherished as I do when I'm with you." Cole's heart soared at her words. He gently squeezed her hand, conscious of not pushing too far too fast. "Then we'll figure it out together. No rush, no pressure. Just two people walking the same path for a while, seeing where it leads." Zara's smile brightened. "I'd like that very much." The summer of 1876 unfolded in a tapestry of golden days and star-filled nights. Cole and Zara settled into a partnership that transcended conventional definitions, neither merely friends nor officially courting, yet bound by a deepening connection that grew stronger with each passing day. They worked side by side on the ranch, expanding the garden, adding a henhouse that Zara designed, discussing improvements to the cabin that would make it more comfortable for the coming winter. In the evenings, They would read aloud to each other or simply talk, sharing thoughts and dreams that had never before been voiced. Physical affection developed slowly, respectfully. A hand offered to help Zara across a stream. Her arm linked through his as they walked to check the cattle, fingers brushing as they passed tools back and forth. Each small touch was a revelation, a step toward healing for Zara and a lesson in patience for Cole. Their first kiss came on a warm June evening as fireflies danced in the gathering dusk. They had been sitting on the porch, discussing a letter that had arrived from Sheriff Pullman confirming that Victor Dawson had indeed relocated to San Francisco. The relief of knowing he was truly gone, at least for now, had lightened something in Zara's spirit. "It feels like the last chain breaking," she said, gazing out at the fireflies blinking in the yard. "Like I can finally breathe fully again." Cole watched her profile in the fading light, struck as always by her quiet strength, her grace in the face of adversity. "You deserve every happiness, Zara. Every dream you ever had to set aside." She turned to him then, her eyes reflecting the first emerging stars. "Including this one," she whispered, and leaned forward to press her lips gently against his. The kiss was brief, tender, a question as much as a statement. When Zara drew back slightly, uncertainty flickering across her face, Cole resisted the urge to pull her closer. Instead, he smiled, letting her see everything he felt in that moment: the joy, the wonder, the promise of more when she was ready. "Including that one," he agreed softly. "Especially that one." Zara's answering smile was radiant, full of a confidence that grew stronger every day. "I never thought I could trust a man again," she admitted. "Never thought I'd want to." She reached up to trace the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "Thank you for proving me wrong." Cole turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. "Thank you for being brave enough to try." As summer gave way to autumn, their relationship deepened in both emotional and physical intimacy. Each step was taken carefully, with Zara setting the pace. Cole was endlessly patient, understanding that trust, once shattered, required time to rebuild. The legal proceedings for Zara's divorce progressed slowly but steadily. Judge Wilson, sympathetic to her situation, expedited the process as much as the law allowed. By October, with the mountains wearing their first dusting of snow, the final decree arrived by mail. Zara stared at the document, her hands trembling slightly. "It's done," she said, wonder coloring her voice. "I'm free, legally completely free." Cole, who had been repairing a chair by the fire, set aside his tools and came to stand beside her. "How does it feel?" "Strange," she admitted. "Wonderful and terrifying at the same time." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with emotion. "For the first time in my adult life, I belong entirely to myself." Cole nodded, understanding the significance of her words. "That's as it should be." Zara set the document aside and rose to face him. "But what if," she said softly, "I wanted to share that self with someone? Someone who has shown me what love truly looks like: patient, kind, respectful." Cole's heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Then that would be your choice, your decision freely made." "It is my choice," Zara affirmed, stepping closer until they were mere inches apart. "And I choose you, Cole Xanders, if you'll have me." Cole had imagined this moment in countless ways over the past months, but the reality of Zara standing before him, offering her heart with such courage and clarity, surpassed anything he could have dreamed. "I've loved you since that first week," he confessed, finally allowing himself to speak the words he'd held back for so long. "Since watching you rebuild yourself day by day, finding your strength again." He reached for her hands, holding them gently between his own. "I will love you for all the days I have left, Zara, and I will spend each one making sure you never regret choosing me." Their kiss this time was deeper, fuller, a promise sealed between two people who had found in each other something neither had believed possible. When they finally drew apart, Zara's eyes shimmered with tears of joy. "I think," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth, "that Mrs. Finch was right all along." Cole raised an eyebrow in question. "About what?" "She told me, that last day in town, that sometimes we have to walk through darkness to find where we truly belong." Zara's smile widened. She said she'd never seen two people more clearly meant for each other, for all that we'd met under such dire circumstances. Cole chuckled, remembering the shrewd widow's knowing looks when he'd visited Zara at the boarding house. Wise woman, Mrs. Finch. The winter of 1876 into 1877 was harsh by Montana standards, with heavy snows and bitter winds that howled around the cabin walls. But inside, warmth prevailed. Cole and Zara weathered the season in a cocoon of shared work and shared love, planning for spring and the changes they would make to the ranch together. They were married on the first truly warm day of April 1877, almost exactly a year after Zara had fled her abusive husband and found sanctuary in a stranger's barn. The ceremony was small but joyful, held in Lovelock's church with Sheriff Pullman, Mrs. Finch, and a handful of others in attendance. Zara wore a simple dress of pale blue, her dark hair adorned with early spring wildflowers that Cole had gathered that morning. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was witnessed by people who had seen their story unfold, had seen a woman broken and afraid transform into one who stood tall and confident, choosing a new path with clear eyes and an open heart. Had seen a solitary rancher become a man whose life now centered on a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine love. "Mrs. Xanders," Cole whispered against her lips, the name a caress. "Mr. Xanders," Zara replied, her smile brighter than the spring sunshine streaming through the church windows. Life on the ranch flourished under their combined care. Cole expanded his herd, while Zara began teaching the children from neighboring homesteads, fulfilling her long-deferred dream. They added rooms to the cabin, transforming it into a proper home filled with books, music, and laughter. Word reached them occasionally about Victor Dawson. He had remarried in San Francisco, to a wealthy widow whose fortune would help him rebuild the business empire he'd been forced to abandon in Lovelock. The news brought no fear to Zara, only a distant pity for the woman who had unwittingly stepped into the role she had escaped. "Do you think he'll ever change?" she asked Cole one evening as they sat on their expanded porch watching the sunset paint the Montana sky. Cole considered the question seriously. Some men might with the right motivation, but Dawson. He shook his head. "Men like that believe they're entitled to control others. It's woven into who they are." Zara nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "I used to wonder what I did wrong, what I could have done differently to make him love me properly." She sighed softly. "Now I understand that the fault was never mine. You showed me that, Cole. You showed me what real love looks like." Cole pressed a kiss to her temple, overwhelmed as always by her resilience, her capacity for healing and growth. "You showed me too," he said quietly. "I thought I was complete on my own, that this land and my work were enough. But you taught me that true completeness comes from sharing your life with someone who makes you better just by being themselves." In the spring of 1878, their family expanded with the birth of their son, Thomas, named after Cole's father. A daughter, Eleanor, followed 2 years later, bearing Zara's mother's name. The children grew strong and happy in the freedom of the ranch, surrounded by parents whose love for each other served as a daily example of what marriage should be. The story of how they met became family lore, carefully edited as the children grew old enough to ask questions. They learned that their mother had once been married to another man, one who had not been kind, that she had sought shelter in their father's barn on a stormy night, that their father had seen her need and responded with compassion that grew into love. "Your father saw me when no one else would look," Zara would tell the children. "He reminded me of who I truly was when I had almost forgotten. And your mother taught me the true meaning of courage," Cole would add. "She showed me that real strength isn't about physical power, but about facing your fears and choosing to be more than what the world expects of you." These lessons, along with countless others, shaped their children's understanding of love, respect, and partnership. Thomas grew into a young man who treated women with unfailing courtesy, while Alina developed a fierce independence tempered with compassion for those in need. As the 19th century drew to a close and a new era dawned, Cole and Zara Xanders had built a life that stood as testament to the healing power of genuine love. Their ranch had expanded, becoming one of the most prosperous in the region. Their home remained open to those in need of shelter or support, particularly women seeking escape from situations like the one Zara had fled so many years before. On the 20th anniversary of the night Cole had found Zara hiding in his barn, they sat together on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, where once Zara had hung laundry while recovering from the visible and invisible wounds of abuse. "Do you ever wonder," Cole asked, his hand finding hers as it had countless times over the years, "what would have happened if you hadn't chosen my barn that night? If you'd run in another direction?" Zara considered the question, her face still beautiful to him, the fine lines around her eyes and mouth adding character rather than diminishing her loveliness. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I remember something my father used to say, that there are no accidents in this life, only appointments we didn't know we had." She squeezed his hand gently. "I think I was always meant to find you, Cole. It just took a storm to get me there." Cole brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her wedding band. "Then I'm grateful for the storm," he said simply, "and for every day since." As twilight deepened around them, painting the Montana sky in shades of purple and gold, they remained on the porch, hands intertwined, hearts still beating in unison after all these years. The bruises that had once told a story of pain and fear had long since faded, replaced by the marks of a life well-lived. Laugh lines, calluses from honest work, the gentle touches they still exchanged as naturally as breathing. In finding each other, they had found themselves. In loving each other, they had healed wounds deeper than any visible mark. And in building a life together, they had created something beautiful from the broken pieces of what came before, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, courage, and love freely given and gratefully received.